Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's to follow a really fascinating and honestly quite profound lyrical essay by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD.
It really is.
And this dive takes us right into something we all grapple with, language.
It does, yeah. And it's such a powerful exploration. The source material, it kind of weaves together these complex layers of identity, specifically being transfemme with neurodivergence, AuDHD, and also this specific cognitive style called Gestalt language processing, or GLP.
Right. And the core idea, the argument here, is that the usual, linear language structures the world often demands, they can force minds that work this way into fragmentation.
They feel untranslated. That's the term the author uses.
Exactly. So our goal is to explore how reclaiming what Hoerricks calls poetic syntax becomes this path toward becoming authentically whole.
And that really brings us to the key question for you, the listener, to kind of hold on to during this deep dive. What happens when the basic language your mind uses, to find coherence, to understand itself? What happens when that's fundamentally different from the language you're taught, the language you're expected to use?
Okay, let's get into this journey then. It starts with this struggle, right, for a decoder ring.
Yeah.
The writer talks about going back to college later in life, late 30s. This was around 2006. And just desperately trying to find the code, the key to translate this constant hum of perception into something that worked for academic writing.
That's such a good description. And their writing, right away, tutors flagged it. They said it was poetic but unrefined. It had this shimmer, something untamed. But the feedback was always push towards dissection analysis, get it into this rigid linear order.
Like take the shimmer apart and make bullet points out of it.
Exactly. But the thing is, what the writer was trying to translate wasn't linear in the first place.
Right. They're searching for a code to unlock thought, but what's coming out naturally is, how does the source put it, sensory constellations. Part sound, part feeling, part light.
Yeah. It sounds less like building a sentence and more like capturing a feeling or an image that emerges.
That's a great way to put it. It's like they were tracing the edges of clarity,
Yeah.
That feeling I think a lot of neurodivergent folks might recognize, searching for this logical key to unlock something that's fundamentally sensory or emotional. They thought they were unskilled because fluency had to mean linearity.
And that's the pivot, isn't it? The key insight in the essay.
Yeah. They thought that fragmented pulse in their language was a flaw, proof they couldn't do it right.
But for Gestalt minds, the task is, well, it's completely different from what we usually teach. The source makes it really clear. Gestalt thinkers, they process in wholes first, these total concepts, these gestalts.
Okay.
So the job isn't assembling language from little pieces, like Lego bricks one by one.
Right.
It's unfolding it. It's translating that big, complex, whole sensory thing into the constraint of individual words, line by line.
So if a linear thinker is like, okay, X happened, that made me sad, I'll write a sentence about X causing sadness. What's the Gestalt version? Is it more like trying to capture the entire vibe of a rainy afternoon in one go?
That's a really good analogy. Exactly. It's immediate. It's simultaneous. It's the feel of the air, a memory popping up, the exact gray light outside, all collapsing into one shape, maybe one phrase, a Gestalt.
Wow.
And trying to unpack that shape into neat analytical bits feels unnatural. Forced, like you're destroying the very thing you're trying to describe.
So that constant pressure from the tutors, dissect this, comply with analytical order, it was actually pushing them away from how their mind naturally worked.
Yes, and that pressure led to what the source calls their first quiet rebellion. When people who kept saying the writing was too poetic, they started to realize, wait a minute, maybe that's just my first language trying to come out.
So the decoder ring wasn't out there in the world somewhere.
No. It was hidden in me all along.
But this isn't just about one person's writing style, is it? The essay argues this whole struggle, this difficulty translating embodied experience, it's tied to something much bigger, an institutional problem. They call it the analytic wound at the root of our disciplines.
Yeah, this is where it gets broader, more structural, and definitely political.
Yeah.
The source traces this wound back to early psychoanalysis, specifically Freud.
Okay.
The argument is he was faced with all this evidence of systemic violence against women, actual stories of abuse, of trauma, real lived experiences.
And instead of dealing with that reality, which was maybe dangerous or uncomfortable, he shifted. He turned it into symbolic fantasy.
Exactly. He sort of reclassified genuine pain, violation, as desire, turned away from the lived trauma towards theory.
Wow.
And that moment, the essay argues, was huge. It was this institutional downgrading of felt experience, the sensory, the embodied into something that needed an expert to interpret. It became just a symbol.
And out of that, this entire language of expertise was born, as the source says. A language designed not really to feel or connect, but to abstract, to interpret.
The kind of dead language, yeah.
Yeah.
It cemented this analytic tradition, putting abstraction on a pedestal and fostering this deep mistrust of anything sensory, anything seen as, quote, feminine, anything associative or poetic.
So thinking in images or rhythms became suspect, maybe even a sign of instability.
Precisely. And the source connects that legacy directly to how autistic individuals, trans folks, GLP processors are often treated today.
Because their language still gets judged by those old, rigid, linear standards.
Right. Their speech gets called disorganized, their metaphors, oh, that's excessive. Their nonlinear, embodied, kind of looping way of communicating the language of the Gestalt is pathologized, called fragmentation.
But the essay pushes back hard on that. Is it really fragmentation?
Or, and this is the crucial question the source raises, is it simply that the analytical system just can't grasp wholeness when it's expressed nonlinearly? The author argues pretty emphatically that this so-called fragmentation is actually the system's integrity.
Yeah.
It's the wholeness speaking in the only way it can. It's whole, just in a shape we're not used to recognizing.
Which leads perfectly into the academic validation part.
Yeah.
The source brings in Hans Jörg Stahlschmidt's work,
From 2024, yeah.
who talks about poetic language not just as style, but as embodiment, as something essential for revitalizing communication.
And for the writer, reading this was a huge aha moment. Finally, recognition. Because Stahlschmidt confirms what the Gestalt mind kind of intrinsically knows. Poetry isn't just decoration you add on later.
Right.
It is cognition. It has to live inside the body to mean anything. It's alive, it's associative, it's spontaneous, and that just validates the entire GLP experience right there.
So for the Gestalt thinker, using a metaphor isn't like putting a fancy bow on an idea.
Not at all. It's functional. It's
Yeah.
literally the tool for making coherence happen. That's how the mind works. Well, think about it. Coherence happens by gathering up all these simultaneous things, light, texture, memory, scent, patterns, and consolidating them, pulling them into a single, unified, metaphorical shape the mind can actually hold on to.
The metaphor is the container.
Exactly. The metaphor is the container, which also explains why writing, which is so linear, so structured, often comes last for a Gestalt mind.
It needs something first.
It needs an arrival, a meeting point, body, emotion, self-awareness all coming together.
You can't force coherence into a straight line.
No. The source says it flowers only when safety is real. That's when the embodied stuff, the previously inarticulate material, can actually become luminous.
It affirms that the way they think, sensory, looping, image-based, it isn't broken. It's beautifully, necessarily whole.
And realizing this really highlights the limits of our traditional systems, doesn't it?
Yeah, the essay talks about how traditional therapy, even standard speech therapy, often just isn't equipped for unsupported adult GLPs.
The ones described as fluent in fragments and metaphors, who can, speak in music but cannot survive small talk.
Because those systems are still trying to impose that linear structure, that analytical narrative, they keep asking, tell me the story of your pain.
When the person's internal language is asking, what's the texture of my pain, it's a fundamental mismatch.
So the breakthrough, it came from somewhere totally unexpected.
Completely. After weeks of kind of gentle confusion, the occupational therapist just throws out almost casually, maybe, improv theater.
Improv.
And the source says that was it. That was the perfect key. Because improv creates poetic space.
What does that mean, poetic space?
It's a container for safe silliness, for spontaneous metaphor, for building worlds instantly just from a gesture or a sound.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't require you to explain yourself, no backstory needed, no narrative justification, just immediate associative response.
So what was the key ingredient there? The silliness, the spontaneity, the low stakes?
I think it was the permission to be out of order. Improv doesn't demand you analyze your impulse or justify a metaphor, unlike maybe therapy or formal writing.
Right.
It just asks you to show up, participate through rhythm, through association. So the writer reconnected with their body's own timing, their natural rhythm, their humor even. Healing happened through play, not analysis.
That's a really profound difference. Therapy was asking them to interpret the pain, maybe shrink those big metaphors down into sadness.
Right. Make it manageable, narratable.
But poetry and improv as a form of it, let them just experience it, unedited.
Exactly. Where the traditional systems wanted the narrative of pain, beginning, middle, end, this poetic space just sought its pulse. That associative, spontaneous rhythm, that was the way back to coherence.
And then writing became the way to metabolize it all, to kind of digest the sensory residue, the grief that hadn't been spoken, the sheer exhaustion of constantly translating.
Poetry didn't fix the trauma. It sang the trauma.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. It taught the writer's nervous system a new way. To sing in his own key. To hum instead of mask. And the source really emphasizes this shift. Moving away from correction, from pathology, trying to fix the person, and moving towards curiosity, towards pattern recognition, trying to understand the system itself.
And this linguistic homecoming, finding the right language, that's what finally allowed all the pieces of the writer's identity to converge.
Beautifully, yeah. The source explains that the feminine identity, she, wasn't like an invention or a sudden decision.
Right.
She was a rhythm that the writer just hadn't learned how to follow yet.
And when she arrived, she didn't erase him, that linear, analytical way of speaking needed for survival, for meetings and bills.
No, not at all. She harmonized with him. She became the grammar of aliveness, turning breath into cadence, allowing coherence to feel like song.
And it was the poetic language that made this possible. Not theory, not analysis, but the actual rhythm and texture of poetry. The words became, as they say, a home I could finally live inside.
Yeah, coherence just arrived. The source says, like, spring inevitable, tender, bold. It happened when the world stopped demanding that impossible translation, forcing the whole into these sterile bits.
So the final synthesis, it's this arrival at total self-acceptance. The writer is now the total me transfemme, AuDHD, GLP, alive. Poetry wasn't an escape from reality, it was the way home. The poem was always there, just waiting to be sung.
And that core message, you can feel the weight behind it.
Yeah.
It's for anyone feeling that mismatch. You were never broken, only untranslated.
Wow. That's a powerful message for anyone who feels like their inner world doesn't quite match the outside demands. So to kind of wrap up our dive here, it really shows that language, it shouldn't be a cage for thought, should it?
No, it should be a threshold.
The threshold, yeah.
Wow.
And when words get their pulse back, that inner door opens. It leads towards return and not escape. Meaning shouldn't be sterile. Words are organs of belonging. I love that phrase.
Me too. And for you, the listener, this is so relevant because challenging those accepted dialects of order and restraint, those linear analytic systems you run into every day, sometimes that's exactly what's needed for real self-coherence, whether it's in your work communication or just in your personal life.
The writer does mention wondering, what it can reach other unsupported adult GLPs besides an essay. They suggest maybe a collective improvisation of sorts.
Right. So if coherence looks like rhythm and laughter and just letting metaphors unfurl spontaneously.
Yeah.
Maybe here's a final thought that you want.
Okay.
What systems in your life, your workplace with its structures, education processes, maybe even personal relationships, which ones are currently enforcing that kind of sterile, dead language of abstraction?
Yeah.
And how could they maybe be gently reshaped, rebuilt to allow for more of that poetic, embodied coherence to come through?